In the aftermath of the conflict, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a resolute declaration, asserting Israel's intent to assume complete control of the security situation in the besieged Gaza Strip. At this critical juncture, the Hamas-run health ministry reported a tragic and alarming death toll exceeding 10,000. Defying calls for a ceasefire, Netanyahu emphasized Israel's unwavering commitment to the eradication of Hamas, the militant organization responsible for a devastating attack on October 7th, which reportedly claimed the lives of over 1,400 individuals in Israel, predominantly civilians. This assault also resulted in the capture of more than 240 hostages, including children and elderly citizens, igniting a massive Israeli bombardment of Gaza and an escalating ground offensive. 1 month into the conflict, Palestine reported that the death toll in Gaza had surpassed 10,000, a figure that included over 4,000 children. International condemnation of Israel's conduct during the conflict intensified, with United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres describing Gaza as a graveyard for children. Within the densely populated confines of Gaza, over 1.5 million people were compelled to flee their homes, seeking refuge in other areas of the territory, with vital humanitarian aid arriving only in meager quantities. In this context, Netanyahu disclosed to ABC News that the war would persist until Israel had regained overall security control over Gaza, thereby providing the clearest indication yet of Israel's intentions to maintain a firm grip over the territory, which is home to 2.3 million Palestinians. Watch this.
President Biden has said that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza. Who should govern Gaza when this is over?
Those who don't want to continue the way of Hamas. It certainly is not, I think Israel will, for an indefinite period, will have the overall security responsibility, because we've seen what happens when we don't have it. When we don't have that security responsibility, what we have is the eruption of Hamas terror on a scale that we couldn't imagine.
Last week, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's diplomatic tour included visits to other Arab nations. He held meetings with his counterparts from Egypt and Jordan in Amman. During these meetings, the Arabian countries urged him to request an immediate ceasefire from Israel. However, Israel's Prime Minister, Netanyahu, stated that they would continue their military operations in Gaza until all hostages were released, with the aim of completely eliminating Hamas. In response, the Egyptian foreign minister criticized the United States for what he perceived as a double standard. He pointed out the inconsistency in the U.S. approach as it seeks to stop devastation in Ukraine while appearing willing to permit it in Gaza. Blinken then embarked on a significant diplomatic mission to Turkey, with the overarching goal of quelling the ire of one of Washington's most crucial yet complex allies, all within the backdrop of the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Secretary Blinken's visit to Ankara was indicative of the deteriorating state of relations between the United States and Turkey, marked by a notable absence of high-ranking Turkish officials to receive him. This notable absence underscores the current tension between the two nations, fueled by Turkey's deepening dissatisfaction with the situation in Gaza and other contentious matters that have strained their bilateral ties. Blinken's arrival occurred under the cover of night, with minimal Turkish presence and subdued lighting at the airport. Watch this. In the midst of these diplomatic encounters, Turkey's foreign minister conveyed a pressing request to Blinken for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. He underscored the necessity of such an action to prevent the targeting of civilians and the displacement of the population by Israel. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan opted to journey to a remote region in the northeast of the country, a move that seemed to signal his reluctance to meet with the top U.S. diplomat. While Secretary of State Blinken was in Turkey, thousands of protesters assembled outside an air base that houses U.S. forces in the southeastern part of the country. Additionally, President Erdogan suspended all communications with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, publicly decrying what he perceived as Western double standards, highlighting the disparate response from the international community to conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza. Several issues are currently tarnishing the relationship between the United States and Turkey, extending beyond the Israel-Hamas conflict. Washington's frustration is mounting due to delays in the Turkish parliament's approval of Sweden's NATO membership, which remains blocked. Furthermore, the United States has imposed heightened sanctions on Turkish individuals and companies suspected of assisting Russia in evading sanctions and acquiring equipment for its conflict in Ukraine. President Erdogan has conveyed his nation's commitment to coordinating behind the scenes with regional allies to ensure a continuous flow of humanitarian aid to Gaza. However, he has officially severed all contact with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, stating that Netanyahu is no longer someone we can talk to, adding, "We have given up on him." Erdogan also accused Western powers of applying double standards in the region and losing their moral authority. He remarked, "Those who shed crocodile tears for the civilians killed during the war between Ukraine and Russia are today quietly witnessing the murder of thousands of innocent children." Meanwhile, the former President of the United States, Barack Obama, issued a thought-provoking caution regarding the complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict. He emphasized that it was essential to confront the unvarnished truth and acknowledge that nobody's hands are clean to some degree if a genuine solution is to be found. While acknowledging the horrific nature of Hamas's attack, Obama added that the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories and the suffering of Palestinians are equally unbearable.
That what Hamas did was horrific, and there's no justification for it. And what is also true is that the occupation and what's happening to Palestinians is unbearable. And what is also true is that there is a history of the Jewish people that may be dismissed unless your grandparents or your great-grandparents or your uncle or your aunt tell you stories about the madness of anti-Semitism. And what is true is that there are people right now who are dying who have nothing to do with what Hamas did.
He emphasized the need for a comprehensive understanding of the issue, stating that nobody's hands are entirely clean, and there is a collective responsibility for allowing the decades-long conflict to persist, extending that responsibility to the entire world. Previously, Obama had expressed concerns about the conflict, warning that any Israeli actions disregarding the human toll of the war against Hamas could have unintended consequences. President Joe Biden and senior administration officials have been urging Israel to implement temporary humanitarian pauses in the ongoing conflict to facilitate the delivery of aid into Gaza and the safe evacuation of civilians from the Palestinian enclave. As recently as Monday, Biden engaged in discussions on this matter with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as reported by the White House. However, there doesn't appear to be a clear agreement reached at this point. Netanyahu, in an exclusive interview, once again rebuffed the idea of a ceasefire in Gaza unless hostages are released. He also addressed the post-war situation in Gaza. In response to a question about a ceasefire, Netanyahu stated, "Regarding temporary tactical pauses, such as an hour here or an hour there, we've experienced them before, and we will assess the circumstances to facilitate the entry of humanitarian aid or the departure of individual hostages. However, I don't anticipate a comprehensive ceasefire."